This near-death experience is not mine, but it's one I experienced through my grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. There is a lot of backstory and detail I will try to simplify, but feel free to ask questions if you need anything made clearer. My grandmother was born in the 1920s, and at age 4 was sold/rented out in a slavery-type situation by her mother and stepfather. She did eventually come home after her mother became diabetic, which was a much bigger deal back then than it is now. Her mother brought her home to take care of her, which my grandmother did until she ran away to marry my grandfather at the start of America's involvement with World War II, where my grandfather was stationed in Lincoln fixing planes. They had a good life together and had 2 children, my mother and my uncle. Their life was really good, think the post-war boom, until my grandpa messed up and cheated on her. They stayed married, but between that and how grandma's mother had treated her, she became a pretty bitter and angry person in general. When I came along, I was about the only person who brought her any peace. In 2009, everyone in my family started to die, until all that was left was me, my mom, and my grandma. My uncle killed himself in 2011, which spiraled my grandmother from mild dementia to full-blown dementia, where nothing made sense anymore. My mother and I tried to take care of her at home, but she was more than either of us could handle safely. She was angry and mean all the time, and made more so when she remembered that her son was gone. We were on the cusp of surrendering and contacting a nursing home when she fell and pulled a chair down on herself and broke her hip. The broken hip, which happened at 89, kicked dementia into more like Alzheimer's disease, and the angry and bitter just became worse. When the doctors sent her to a nursing home to do rehab after the surgery, she ended up in the memory unit, because in her wheelchair, she tried to escape many times. This would have been in 2013. We went out faithfully to see her and keep her comfortable, but from late 2014 to early 2015, my mother took ill and was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She died on April 15, 2015. At this point in my grandma's life, I decided, after consulting with people who understood Alzheimer's and geriatric psychology, not to tell grandma her daughter was dead because she wouldn't be able to process and grieve the loss. As I told you earlier, my uncle killed himself, and at the point we are in the story now, grandma didn't remember it and often spoke about how he and her brother, also gone, were working on the railroads, working as something in the government, or owning the nursing home. Due to that, and her general dementia anger, we thought it best to just not mention it. Oddly, grandma never asked about my mum, but I seemed to take on that role in her delusions. I never corrected her, as angry and cantankerous as she was. I wouldn't do anything to hurt her, and I prayed constantly for her peace. This brings me to my, and our family's, religious nature. Until I converted to Christianity back in the 90s, we were not a religious family. Even then, it was only my mom and dad who converted with me. We were Baptists back then. In 2016, though, I had a huge conversion event and became Catholic. I was the only one left in the family, and by this time, my grandmother was well gone mentally. I never said anything about my conversion to her when I visited. She just talked about how terrible grandpa and her mother were, and at that point, she believed them to be alive. In 2017, I got a phone call from the nurse in charge of the memory unit where grandma lived. Because of all the death and trauma of the last decade, I knew in her voice the moment she said hello that she was trying to speak calmly and not alarm me, but she highly suggested that I come out to the nursing home and see grandma because she wasn't feeling well. I knew this was trouble. I dropped everything and went out to the nursing home, and my suspicions were correct. Grandma had been eating like any other night, and she suddenly slumped over and lost bladder control. She was a DNR, so they got her cleaned and put her in her bed and called me at the same time. They all suspected, as did I, that she was about to die. When I got there, she was clean and lying in bed. She acknowledged me right away, and when she spoke, she didn't sound garbled or even like she had dementia. She spoke right away, and for the first time in years, she called me by name and lifted her hand to me. She said, and there is no edit or add to this, I wrote it down as soon as I got home that day. Grandma said, "Lisa, you are here." "Yes, Grammy, I am here. You are safe." She paused and said, "I went to a place." No, the place came to me and it wasn't a place. It was more like a state of being. I can remember holding my breath and taking her cold hand. "Tell me about it." She said, "It was a little scary." I asked why. She said, Because there was no pain, and I wasn't cold, and I wasn't lonely, and all around me was love. I am not used to not being in pain or not being lonely. Your mother was there, and she looked more beautiful and more alive than I have ever seen her. They were all there, with Jesus. She looked at me, and trust me, my eyes were streaming tears. Do you think that was real? I couldn't say anything at first because I was all choked up, but I started to nod, yes. I finally choked it out, yes, yes. I believe in this place. It is heaven, our home, and if this place comes to you again, you have my permission to go there and stay. She nodded, blinked, her hand became warm, and she wanted to get up and go pee. She went from completely lucid back to dementia with the blink of an eye. Having buried my whole family and being around dying people, I knew that sometimes people, before they die, get a strange second wind, almost like they are going to turn a corner and get completely better. I stayed with Grandma a while that night, but she was just as she always was. As far as dementia goes, the only difference was she stopped talking about mean and mad things. She smiled, she laughed, she had joy. I left that night and came back the next day, and I found her in her wheelchair smiling. The moment I came in and sat down, she smiled and said, "I am going home soon." I was hesitant because back in the first part of her being in the nursing home, she often said that, but she meant that she was leaving the nursing home and heading back to the house she and my uncle lived in when he killed himself. Instead of assuming anything, I simply smiled and replied, "Oh really? When?" She grinned. "A man from your church is going to come and take me to heaven where I was last night." That got my attention because I had not been in a church for 20 years, and she didn't know I was going to a church now. I said, "Oh, really?" "Yes, he will come and make sure I get on the plane." Now, I didn't know what that exactly meant because something else I knew from experience is that people who were dying did speak in metaphors sometimes, but I also didn't want to think this was a spiritual message right away because she could have also just as easily been speaking in dementia terms too. I tried to get some kind of description, but all she would say was that a man from my church would come and take her home. I brought out a priest friend of mine to pray with her the next day, thinking maybe she was just in need of prayer. He did, and then after he left, she turned to me and grinned and said, "He isn't who I am waiting for," and she winked at me. Well, after a couple of days, she stopped talking about it, but everyone commented about how her demeanor had changed a lot. She was not an angry person anymore, and while she had some bad moods, she wasn't obsessed with talking about Grandpa or her mother, or anyone else who hurt her. Almost exactly a year later, I got a call early in the morning that my grandma was at the emergency room. She had fallen in the middle of the night and broken her other hip. I went up right away, and by the time I got there, she was in a room. As soon as she saw me, she smiled. "This is it. This is our last trip together." That was what she said when I got into the room. But then 2 breaths later, she was not lucid. I called my priest friend to pray with her again, and I had to choose to do her hip surgery. It wasn't an easy choice. If I didn't consent to the surgery, she was going to be in a great deal of pain for whatever short time she had left. Or we could do the surgery, and she would have better pain control, and she might live. I consented to the surgery, but they had to take her to a bigger city to a special trauma surgeon due to her age and the severity of the break. It was touch and go for a while, but the surgery happened, and then the doctor, a couple of days later, said that Grandma wasn't thriving. She wasn't eating much, couldn't swallow well, and was dying. We brought her home on hospice care, and I kept praying for guidance about what to do next. 2 days after she got home, the nursing home called me and said her breathing had changed, and I knew she was beginning to actively die. I was with her all that day and overnight until I went to get a couple of hours sleep, then came back the next day. About mid-afternoon, as I read Psalms to her, I called the parish office of the church local to the nursing home and asked if a priest could come to pray for her. My soon-to-be pastor showed up in like 15 minutes and prayed with her and me. Then, at random, he asked if she had been baptized, which I didn't know because she never spoke of her childhood in much detail because of how her mother had rented her out. I didn't know, but I knew she believed because of what had happened to her and because she started going to Bible studies. I have no clue what Alzheimer's Bible study looks like, but she always went. He took my glass of water and said my grandmother's name, and said if it was her will to be baptized, that he baptized her in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We spoke a little longer, and then he had to go say Mass. He told me he would pray for her at Mass that evening. At 6:30 that evening, when he was consecrating the Eucharist at Mass, she died. I am fighting stage 4 kidney cancer right now. I inherited it from my mother, and I know that my time is limited. I believed in heaven before this happened and could tell you many stories of my family members as they died. Still, as I sit and think about her story, I am brought great hope and comfort that it's never too late for the grace to die well, and that my mother is there. She looks more beautiful and alive than she ever did, and my pastor put my grandma on the plane to go home to her state of being, where there was no pain, no loneliness, and the love kept her warm. I don't know if this is something you will use, but I felt strongly I should write you. If you have questions or want more details about anything, please let me know. Much love and many blessings, Lisa. That does it for Lisa's experience as told by her grandmother. What did you all think about her grandmother's experience? What did you think after hearing that a man from Lisa's church was going to be the one to take her grandma home? Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. Lisa, I don't know if you're still around, but I hope that you have managed to beat your cancer and continue to live a wonderful life. As a special request, I would like to ask you all to continue to pray for Lisa through her battle. Until the next video, stay safe and continue to be blessed.